Greenland is melting, and the world is not ready for what comes next. Not in a vague, distant, scientists are concerned kind of way. In a very specific, very immediate, very geopolitical kind of way. Because when the ice retreats in Greenland, it doesn't just reveal water. It reveals coastline. It reveals shipping corridors. It reveals the ocean floor. And buried in that ocean floor, beneath the fjords and the permafrost and the ancient rock, lies one of the most extraordinary concentrations of rare earth minerals, hydrocarbons, and untouched fishing grounds anywhere on the planet. By the end of this video, you will never look at Greenland the same way again. And here's the part nobody tells you up front. This isn't a story about climate change. It's a story about who gets to profit from it. Let's start with something that might reframe everything you think you know. Most people, when they picture Greenland, picture a massive white island sitting above Canada, roughly the same size as Africa if you're using the wrong map projection. The Mercator map, the one that hung in nearly every classroom for over a century, inflates Greenland so dramatically that it appears comparable in size to the entire African continent. In reality, Africa is about 14 times larger. That distortion wasn't just cartographic error. It planted a psychological idea that Greenland was enormous, distant, frozen, and irrelevant. A white void. And that assumption is now colliding violently with reality. Because Greenland is not a void. It never was. And in a moment, you'll see exactly why the world's most powerful nations have quietly known this for decades. The island, technically the world's largest, covering over 2 million square kilometers, sits in the Arctic, straddling the North Atlantic and the Arctic Ocean. Its ice sheet, which covers roughly 80% of the landmass, holds about 10% of the world's total freshwater supply. For generations, that ice sheet was the defining feature of the place. It drove climate patterns, fed polar ecosystems, and kept the surrounding waters cold enough to sustain some of the richest fishing grounds in the Northern Hemisphere. The waters off the Greenlandic coast have long supported communities of Inuit and Greenlandic people who built entire cultures around the sea, around the migration of Arctic char, the movement of narwhal, the seasonal rhythms of cod and halibut. This wasn't just an economy, it was identity, and it's changing faster than almost anyone predicted. If you enjoy these deep dives into hidden geography and the forces reshaping our world, consider subscribing. More of this is coming. Here's where it starts to get wild. Over the past several decades, the Greenland ice sheet has been losing mass at an accelerating rate. Peer-reviewed research published by institutions including NASA and the Danish Meteorological Institute indicates that Greenland is now losing over 250 billion tons of ice per year, a figure that has more than quadrupled since the 1990s. That number alone would be alarming. But the downstream effects, and I mean this literally, are what's truly reshaping the map. As the ice retreats, it exposes new coastline. As permafrost thaws, it destabilizes ground that communities have lived on for generations. And as Arctic waters warm, the fish move. And when fish move, the fishing industry follows. And when the fishing industry follows, the geopolitics follow right behind it. And in a moment, you'll understand why this particular sequence of events has military analysts paying very close attention. The fishing dimension is the one that gets the least attention, which is strange because it's arguably the most immediate. Greenland's fishing industry, centered largely on shrimp, Greenlandic halibut, and increasingly cod, represents the backbone of the island's export economy. Some estimates suggest fisheries account for more than 80% of Greenland's total exports. For a place with a population of roughly 56,000 people, smaller than many mid-sized cities, that dependence is staggering, and it is now being destabilized from two directions at once. Warmer waters are driving some traditional species into deeper, colder zones, farther north or farther offshore, beyond the reach of smaller local vessels. At the same time, those same warmer waters are pulling in new species. Atlantic mackerel, for instance, began appearing in Greenlandic waters in significant numbers, almost unexpectedly. This sounds like opportunity, but here's the problem. The infrastructure, the licensing frameworks, the international fishing agreements. None of that was built for fish that weren't supposed to be there. And now, larger foreign fleets, attracted by those same new species, are showing up in waters that Greenlandic communities have fished for generations. The tension is real, and it is growing. Now hold that thought about who controls what in Greenlandic waters, because the mineral story runs even deeper, and it gets considerably more complicated. Beneath the ice and beneath the exposed bedrock that the retreating glaciers are revealing, Greenland holds what geologists describe as one of the most geologically diverse mineral landscapes on Earth. The ancient cratons, some of the oldest rock formations on the planet, over 3 billion years old, contain deposits of rare earth elements, uranium, zinc, gold, iron ore, and potentially significant volumes of oil and natural gas offshore. Rare earths are the part of this story that makes global powers genuinely nervous. These 17 elements, things like neodymium, dysprosium, and terbium, are essential components in electric vehicle motors, wind turbines, smartphones, and advanced military hardware. And right now, China controls an estimated 60% or more of global rare earth processing capacity. The United States, the European Union, and their allies have spent years trying to reduce that dependence. Greenland's mineral deposits represent one of the most credible paths to doing exactly that. And in a moment, you'll see how this changes the entire nature of the conversation around Greenland's future. The Kvanefjeld project, one of the most scrutinized proposed mining sites in the world, sits in southern Greenland and contains what some analysts describe as the second largest rare earth deposit outside of China, along with substantial uranium reserves. The project has been at the center of fierce political debate within Greenland, with deeply divided public opinion and shifting electoral outcomes directly tied to the mining question. A Greenlandic election in 2021 saw an environmental party come to power on a platform that included halting the Kvanefjeld project, a decision that sent ripples through mining markets and diplomatic backchannels almost immediately. The story here isn't just about minerals in the ground, it's about who gets to decide. And that question, sovereignty, self-determination, and resource control, is the nerve that every outside power is trying very carefully not to touch too openly. Because here's the geopolitical layer that most coverage buries in the final paragraph. Greenland is technically an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark. It has its own parliament, its own government, its own languages, Greenlandic and Danish, and a growing independence movement that polls suggest has significant popular support. But full independence comes with an economic catch. Greenland currently receives an annual subsidy from Denmark of roughly $500 million, which covers a substantial portion of the public budget. Without that subsidy, or without a replacement revenue source, say from mineral royalties, independence becomes economically precarious. This is the bind. And it is precisely the bind that outside powers, including the United States, have taken note of. The United States has maintained a military presence in Greenland since World War II. Thule Air Base, now formally called Patuffik Space Base, sits in the far northwest of the island and remains one of the most strategically positioned military installations in the world, providing early warning radar coverage across the polar arc and serving as a critical node in American Arctic defense posture. Reports suggest that American interest in Greenland has never really been about tourism or cultural exchange. It has always been about geography. In 2019, when a sitting American president suggested exploring the possibility of purchasing Greenland, the global reaction was a mixture of disbelief and nervous laughter. But the idea wasn't as absurd as it seemed. It was, in a sense, a very blunt expression of something that has been understood in strategic circles for decades. Greenland's location, in a world of melting Arctic ice and emerging polar shipping routes, is almost unparalleled in military and commercial value. Those shipping routes are the final piece of this puzzle, and the piece that connects everything. As Arctic sea ice thins and retreats, new transpolar navigation corridors become increasingly viable for longer portions of the year. The Northwest Passage, running through the Canadian Arctic, and the northern sea route along the Russian coast are already attracting significant commercial interest. Greenland sits at the gateway between the Atlantic and the Arctic, and any significant increase in polar shipping traffic flows directly through its surrounding waters. That means potential port revenue, potential search and rescue coordination responsibilities, potential environmental liability, and potential leverage in negotiations that Greenland has never previously had a seat at. The transformation happening in the Arctic is not just environmental. It is infrastructural. It is commercial. It is military. And Greenland is at the center of all of it simultaneously. Here is the part that doesn't get said enough. The people most immediately affected by all of this, the Inuit communities in the coastal settlements, the fishermen whose livelihoods depend on the seasonal movements of species that are no longer moving predictably, the young Greenlanders trying to navigate a future that looks almost nothing like their parents. These are not abstractions. They are roughly 56,000 people living through a transformation that was not of their making and is not, primarily, being shaped by their choices. The mineral deposits are under their land. The fishing grounds are in their waters. The military bases are on their territory. And the decisions about what happens next are being made, to a significant degree, in Copenhagen, Washington, Brussels, and Beijing. That is the tension at the heart of this story. And it is not going away. If anything, as the environment continues to shift and the economic stakes continue to rise, that tension is going to sharpen considerably. What we are watching, in real time, is a map being redrawn, not by cartographers or by conquest, at least not openly, but by temperature, by physics, by the slow, relentless fact of ice turning to water and water revealing what the ice kept hidden. The fishing grounds, the mineral deposits, the shipping corridors, the military geometry, all of it locked under a layer of ice that is now, systematically and at accelerating pace, disappearing. And every nation with the capacity to act on what emerges is already positioning itself. The question that remains genuinely open, the question that nobody in a position of power seems to have a clean answer for, is whether the people of Greenland will be the authors of their own future, or whether they will watch it be written for them. If this video gave you a new way of seeing what's happening in the Arctic, make sure to subscribe for more map documentaries like this one. Leave a like if you stayed until the end. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people. And drop a comment below. Do you think Greenland will become fully independent within the next 20 years? There is no right answer, and the debate in the comments is always worth reading. Links to related videos are in the description. Stay curious.